Hi everyone, welcome. I'm here today talking with Miranda Cornell. I'm Peter Kim. I'm NAATCO's associate producer, and I have the good fortune of playing Sam Craig in the upcoming benefit reading of Our Town.
Hi, everyone. Like Peter said, my name is Miranda Cornell. I was the production assistant for the benefit reading of Our Town with NAATCO, and otherwise, I am a freelance director.
I was so pleasantly surprised and happy to hear about your history with Our Town, actually. And do you mind sharing a little bit about this project that you're working on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this project that I'm working on kind of is a personal passion project, selfish family history excavation project. So the bit of the background is that in 1943, in the Topaz concentration camp, which was one of the Japanese concentration camps during World War II, this was the one in central Utah. There was a production of Our Town that was put on by the high school drama club, the high school thespian club, and I was just really fascinated by that because that is the camp that my grandmother and her 11 siblings and her widowed mother were incarcerated in for 3 years during World War II. Um, and in my family, and I think this is common in many Japanese American families, we don't talk about camp. It is not a thing that brought up pleasant memories. And so rather than confronting the atrocity, it was just bury it, bury it, bury it. And unfortunately, my grandmother, she was the youngest of the 12 kids. So she was 5 to 8 when she was in camp, but she passed away when I was 8 years old. So there's this African proverb that goes, when an elder dies, a library burns to the ground. And I really felt that with my grandmother specifically, because when she passed away, we found a 20-page manuscript that she had written, stashed away in the closet in her sister's house where we stored all her stuff when she moved to a nursing home, about her childhood in camp. And in the introduction to it, essentially she writes, I hope that if my family ever reads this, my siblings and my mom, I hope that they aren't mad at me for sharing this memory, because I know that it was so hard for so many people. And then she goes to say, but I was a kid, I was 5. I didn't, that was the doorbell. um, she was saying, I was a kid, I was 5 years old. I didn't have the development to realize what was going on. To me, that was just childhood. And it was such a gift to get this piece from my grandmother, to know that she wanted to talk about it. But then at the same time, it was incredibly heartbreaking because she was gone. And clearly it wasn't something we could have asked of any of her still living siblings. Um, so there was that. And then when I found out about this production of Our Town that happened in camp, I was so fascinated because I was like, oh, here's my way in. I'm a theater maker. I've always been involved in theater since I was a little kid. And, we read Our Town in school. We're like, it's boring. Why is this the most performed play in America? And all of a sudden I was like, oh, there's something there. And at first, I was thinking of it being an adaptation, but it's kind of devolved more into a brand new play with snippets of Our Town kind of woven in. I always liken it to what Paula Vogel and Rebecca Teichman did with Indecent. It's a play about another play in a specific situation. So that's kind of my project, and it's done with all young people, because all of the students who performed in this play, they were between the ages of 14 through 19 when they did it in 1943.
What in your research for this production, have you learned anything about the people who were in it, the people who directed it? Do you have any of that information?
I do, yeah. I mean, it's hard because these people are a lot of it's very much so part of the, I think, East Asian immigrant or descendant first gen, to be very private about your private life. And so there's not a lot of information about a lot of these people. And unfortunately, once I got their names from newspapers and clippings in the yearbook and all of that, I mostly came up with obituaries, because now in 2021, I think the youngest person who was involved in that production would be 92 now. So unfortunately, most of them are no longer with us, but there are some people that, did amazing things. I mean, I mean, the best story is one of the women who played Emily. So it was all the female roles were double cast because that's how it goes in high school theater. There are always more girls than boys, and and all of that. She actually went on to be an actress. She changed her name, and she was on Broadway. She played Nurse Nakamura in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in the 1960s on Broadway, and before she passed away.
Wow.
So it's
Wow.
very cool. Like she did catch it and she went on. There was someone who became a singer. She went by the name of Teal Joy. You can find her album on Spotify. There were two people who got married from that production, and they had their son was the chair of the Equal Opportunity Commission under President Obama. Like it's amazing, the ways that you find these people. And I've been in touch with some family members of people who I could find saying like, oh, you're related to this person. Like, could we talk? Could we just like have a quick email conversation? If they're still with us, like, is there a way I could just ask a few basic questions? Stuff like that. But it's been difficult because we're getting farther and farther removed from the survivors.
Do you know anything about the director of the piece, or
I
what kind of instigated I should say, what was the impetus behind putting on this production?
Definitely. So the director was their white Mormon drama teacher. He was educated because this is in central Utah. So Salt Lake City, it's really in the middle of nowhere. That was the point of these camps, is to get them as far away from any kind of sense of civilization as possible, especially from any Western port. So this is in what is now known as Delta, Utah, which is about 2 hours, 2.5 hours away from Salt Lake City, maybe an hour and a half away from Provo. So it's really in the middle of nowhere. There's a little town there, the town of Delta, Millard County. But a lot of the people who were staffing there, a lot of the white folks, they were sourced from around the state on whole, and a lot of recent young graduates from Brigham Young University, a lot of young Mormon folks looking to do good in this way. So his name was George Lewis, who's the director. He was just a guy who loved youth theater, and that's what you can see what he did after camp. He only served in the camp for 1 year as the English and speech and drama teacher, but he went on to work with the youth children's theaters around Utah. And so he was very well loved for that.
I'm not sure if you're still doing the fellowship through the Asian American Arts Alliance, if that's still going or not, but you were able to do a workshop of your piece. Can you share a little bit about any insights or surprises you had into the play or the experience?
Yeah, I mean, so we were all in our 20s. I believe everyone was between the ages of 21 and 29 in that reading. And I think what's interesting about our particular age range is like we were all kind of forced to read or see or do Our Town at some point in school or community theater, and absolutely not understanding it. And that was something we really got to. And so I think we kind of all walked in for the first and second act kind of being like, okay, we're doing it, it's Our Town. And then when we got to the third act, suddenly we were all weeping. We're like, wait, what? How did this happen? What changed?
I think that's like the mastery of the piece.
100%. And I also think for people who are introduced to it when they're 12 or 13, I am not one to be like, young people don't understand in this way, because I think that young people understand so much more than we ever give anyone credit for, which is why I do this piece, because it's about teenagers. But I genuinely do think like there's something about like being just having aged, like gone through the process of aging and lost people and like really felt that as coming into an adult, that changes your perspective on it. Because I read Our Town, even when I was in college, when I started researching this project, I would read it and I'd be like, yeah, this is beautiful, but like, why this play? Why now? And now, I mean, especially after living through COVID and 4 incredibly tumultuous years of a presidency under 45, I think there's no way that I could have gotten what I get out of it now without living through that.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of our big understanding. And then we were thinking about like, oh, was this incarceration during World War II, was this kind of like a forced maturation for these people? Like they had to kind of very rapidly go through it, because what's so interesting about these students is they would have been between the ages of 13 and 17 when Pearl Harbor happened. And just developmentally, while my grandmother didn't know what was going on and really what that meant, these people would. And they're fully cognizant of what's going on. They watched as their friends turned on them. They watched as if there are reports of people who were in schools that were mixed between a lot of Japanese and Chinese students, as the Chinese students tried to distance themselves from the Japanese students, saying like, no, we're not like you. And they watched as they had to have their homes sold and all of their belongings auctioned off because they could only bring what would fit in a suitcase. And their parents got a check for $25 and they were loaded onto a train and they had to live in racetracks. Like, they were old enough to know what that was like. And just wondering like how that forced them to kind of go through a big shift. So by the time they got to the third act of Our Town, maybe they had a better grasp than your average 16-year-old would have on it.
I feel like your average 16-year-old now reading this play
Yeah.
would have a very similar experience.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the reason why, I think, working on the benefit reading for NAATCO, I think we collectively felt that too. And everyone had their own kind of like history with Our Town. But this experience, especially coming into the third act, I think we all were really taken aback by how moving it is. And I think it speaks very much to the moment that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited to share this, this benefit reading on Wednesday.
My goodness, that happens.
I know. This Wednesday, May 19th at 8 p.m.
Yep.
Eastern Standard, because, there is a sense of catharsis, at least for me, because I feel like it just, by speaking to the moment and speaking to what we are enduring, have hopefully gone through and coming out of. It gives us language to identify the feelings that we were having, so that because of that, then you feel like you can move through it,
I'm so excited to see what people's reactions are.
Yeah. And just to wrap it up, are you continuing to work on the piece? And if so, what are you most excited about exploring in this next phase of the piece? And where can we find out more about it?
Yeah, so I am still developing the piece. I think this is going to be like a lifelong endeavor because it is so personal. It's hard to let go of it in any way because it is partially me trying to connect with my family history that I really have no tether to anymore now that my grandmother is gone and most of her siblings are gone as well. So I think it'll be with me for a long time and I'll continue doing it. But yeah, I mean, for the moment, I mean, just following me on my website. I think any updates will be posted there. It's just mirandacornell.com. But what I'm most excited for is really delving into the original text, the work that is not about Our Town, but is what's happening in rehearsal rooms, which was just the canteen of the school because they didn't have an auditorium for those first couple years in camp. That didn't get built until later on. I'm excited about like what was teen culture and young people, like what was their life like outside of this and how did they bring that into the rehearsal room or play practice because it was high school. And what was that? And what was that world like? I'm really excited to get to know these people better outside of just who they played. Yeah.
Miranda, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure talking to you about this amazing project. And, on behalf of NAATCO, we're so happy and grateful that you were able to help with the upcoming benefit reading of Our Town.
Me too. I'm so grateful to be a part of your town, of our town. That was a horrible joke, but I keep it in there. Yes, thank you, Peter, and thank you, Mia, and to everyone who participated in that reading. It was such a really life-affirming week to spend together, especially after a couple really tough months. And I think we have a couple tough months ahead of us as we reopen, whatever that looks like.
Onward. Thanks again, Miranda.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, bye.
Bye.